Mr Speaker.
I call the member for Newtown.
Thank you, Speaker. I move that this House, 1, recognises that housing is a human right, 2, recognises that it is the government's role to ensure that all people in New South Wales have access to safe, secure, habitable and affordable housing, and 3, commits to addressing legislative and policy barriers which prevent people from enjoying this right. I am very pleased to have the opportunity to stand here today in this chamber to be able to speak on behalf of the many communities of people in New South Wales who find themselves without a place to call home, living with rental stress or even unable to consider the prospect of affording their own home. The Greens' vision on housing starts with a simple and fundamental belief that housing is a human right. This is a basic concept which you would believe and you would hope, and I hope to see today, that everybody in this chamber supports. Unfortunately, we have seen decisions made by successive state and federal governments at all levels that have treated housing not as a right, but rather as a commodity, to be bought and sold for profit and subject to the fluctuations of the market and with profit and return on investment, rather than the need to provide a safe and secure place for someone to live being put as the priority. This is a pitiful state that we have now seen place hundreds of thousands of people finding themselves as pawns to the commodity market, which determines whether they will have a roof over their head or their family's head, and whether they will be able to have to spend significant amounts of income on their pay on rents. This week's budget saw a $3.9 billion surplus announced. It is also at a time when we are seeing a growing crisis when it comes to homelessness and housing affordability. It is why the Greens, and I'm very pleased to acknowledge the work of my Greens colleague Justin Field, has put forward the need to start considering a wellbeing index, something that measures the health of our state, the health of New South Wales, beyond just the financial measures that we see in this budget. It's meaningless to make homelessness a priority if we are not seeing an investment in the affordable housing measures that are needed, and that is why the Greens believe that having a house, a roof over your head, is a right, just like education or healthcare. It is not a privilege and it is not an optional extra. Imagine a situation where we had public schools that charged fees of hundreds of thousands of dollars that meant that some children just could not have an education. Imagine the idea of someone waiting to be treated with a heart attack, having to present a credit card and pay for their fees up front before they were given the life-saving treatment. And imagine a situation where we said that all of our schools were full and that children had to wait, like currently people do, on the public housing waiting list 10 years. So we saw 14 and 15-year-olds not being schooled and entering school for the first time at that age. These are things that we would not tolerate in the areas of health or education, and it is an area of housing that we should also make a commitment that we will not tolerate, and that we recognise that things have gone desperately wrong if we do not address them. We know that in actual fact other states like South Australia have fared better when it comes to the delivery of affordable housing, but we also know that what happens is that everyone will use the excuse that there can be no silver bullet when it comes to housing. Well, there may not be one simple, single silver bullet, but we do know that there are obvious solutions that are needed. We do know that in actual fact we have the ability to deliver right now more investment in social and public housing to address the waiting list and the backlog. We know that we have an ability to introduce a housing-first approach that reduces the homelessness in this state. And we know that we can set mandatory targets for inclusionary zoning to deliver affordable housing as part of all new developments in New South Wales. We also know that a cost-free measure that can be done right now to reduce housing stress for so many, 30% of people living in New South Wales, would be to enter and recognise the need to put an end to no-grounds evictions for renters so that dodgy landlords can't kick them out. With so many cranes in the sky and so many new apartments springing up all around us, it is wrong that we can walk down King Street or Crown Street or Martin Place or through a local park and still see people sleeping rough. It is clear that the new developments are not alone helping to address the homelessness crisis, and we need to take an approach that says that housing cannot just be about profit making. It has to be first and foremost about giving people a warm place to call home. It isn't just a city problem. We know that in Parramatta and in Gosford and in regional towns across New South Wales, the housing crisis is a reality. And we know that in this chamber, we can take steps to approach and fix and solve this problem now. We know, and I give my commitment today, that while there might be resistance, there might be powers that be in the big corporates and those with vested interests in the property market that want to prevent this as a fundamental right. But the reality is, and we need to give our commitment today, to say that first and foremost we need to treat housing as an essential provision that government is responsible for providing. We need to recognise that housing is a human right, and we need to recognise that what we need to see as a community is a commitment to say that when the weather is cold outside, when the rain is coming down, it is not okay for us to walk outside of this chamber and see somebody sleeping on a park bench. It is just not okay for us to accept that as an inevitable reality. It is not an inevitable reality. Housing is a human right, and it is time for us to radically switch our agenda, to switch our priorities, to say that actually what we want to see is a commitment to the idea of housing as a basic human right, the commitment of government policies to deliver housing for all people in New South Wales, and to recognise, as the Greens recognise and commit to, that there are solutions. There might not just be one simple solution, but there are solutions, and it takes courage and commitment and determination and passion to solve this crisis. But if we are committed to it, if we recognise that housing is a human right, then we will continue to push in that direction, and we will make sure that we see that people are not sleeping rough, that people are not living under housing stress, and that we actually address the fundamental human right, which is to deliver a safe, habitable, affordable and secure house for every person in New South Wales to live in.